Hello, everybody, and welcome to International Podcast Day 2018, where we are celebrating 40 podcasters from 16 different countries and celebrating the power of podcast around the world. We are very pleased this hour to bring Issa Perez. She is from the Philippines. She'll be talking about how podcasting has exponentially grown in the Philippines and how Filipinos are now telling stories through podcast. Issa, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm doing really well. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you for joining again. This is your second tour of duty with the International Podcast Day crew joining our live stream. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
We're really intrigued to hear what you have to share tonight.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, before I hand over the reins to you, let me get on the right screen there. I want to thank our 2018 sponsors. Be sure to head over to internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors to learn more and to claim your free goodies from our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor is Blueberry, 3 years running. Appreciate the support. They are a full service podcasting company providing hosting, statistics, advertising opportunities for podcasters. Find out more at blueberry.com. I'd like to thank repurpose.io, where they automatically convert your audio podcast into engaging videos and uploads them to YouTube, Facebook, and other social media channels. Go to repurpose.io/IPD to claim your free use today. And also, Podcast Success Academy. This is a resource packed community where there's workshops, tutorials, courses, tools that teach podcasters the skills that no one told them they needed to succeed. Claim your free access. Just head over to podcastsuccessacademy.com tonight. All right. Well, Issa, thank you again for joining us. Really looking forward to sharing a very interesting uh, story here about podcasting growing and how people are now telling stories through podcasts. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So, first of all, hi everyone, mabuhay. Before I start, I'd like to thank the creators of International Podcast Day, Steve and Dave, and of course to our sponsors, Blueberry, Repurpose.io, and the Podcast Success Academy. It's an honor to be here for the second year in a row. We almost didn't make it this year, but the team was so great and made sure that the Philippines would be able to share our stories. And so here we are. If you have any questions in between the entire session, feel free to ask them and I will address them whether later on or while I'm doing my little segment. So, just to give a little recap to everyone of who I am or what I do or what I've done, last year I represented the Philippines with the topic how I started my own podcast through Facebook Live. As I mentioned last year during my session, podcasting was always something that I've wanted to achieve. And as I explore the different platforms of online content creation, I sort of went into blogging, vlogging, and eventually, as I found comfort um, in those platforms, I eventually decided to get into podcasting. So you can still find my first segment on the website or on my website as well. So um, here. So for me, there was always something special about podcasts because it required another level of attention. See, when you're like, it's different from blogging because you're reading and it's more information based, and it's different from vlogging, but and podcasting is just something where you really have to sit down and listen to. And for me, that was something that was very special to me. In modern times where information or stories are easily passed around and are oftentimes disposable, podcasts allowed me and my listeners or other listeners as well to really relate or immerse in on another level. Um, Before I started my podcast, Issa Talks, I was able to identify a really big problem here, which was that Filipinos did not know what podcasts were. I would ask people, do you know what a podcast is? And they would say no. Obviously, we barely knew what blogging was. Vlogging is still really growing here in the Philippines. So I wasn't really surprised that podcasting was something that people or Filipinos weren't really aware of. So, yes, there were a few podcasters at the time, a majority of which I discovered right after my very first segment on International Podcast Day, which meant that there were actually creators out there. However, a lot of us were having a hard time finding our audiences, and also a lot of us didn't know we were actually out there or how to connect with one another. And so in the past year, there's actually been Filipino podcaster groups, and there's been like a little community and other little communities growing. So what I did to address the question or the problem of people not knowing what a podcast was create a live podcast recording on my Facebook, which is very similar to what a live interview or a talk show would be like. I did this. I mentioned it last year that a huge statistics in the Philippines use Facebook, and so that's what we were used to. And I figured that that was the platform that I was going to start on and eventually sort of try to lead them into the way of just listening to the audio podcasts. So I did it in a way that was similar to what a live interview or what a talk show would be like. And in my head, somehow I would get the audience from my live sessions to transition into the audio podcast on my different platforms. So I would do it on my Facebook Live. I would get the audio and put it on my my podcasting platform, and then I would also get the videos and put it on my YouTube, and then I would also plug it on all my social media. So it was a very challenging experience for me, but I did that for the entire year. So last year, if you listen to what I said, or if you catch my previous episode, I mentioned that my biggest challenge with the live sessions was my internet connection. In the Philippines, we are known to have very slow internet, and that was something that I still say until now. But what I eventually learned was that the slowness of our internet connection would eventually be my biggest aid in transitioning my audience from my live videos to my audio. Because the internet was so slow, interested viewers were left to wait for the live sessions to end and go on the audio, which they eventually listened to at work or during their daily commutes or during their free times. So, conversations with my listeners or my viewers to listeners would be, "Hey, Issa, I saw that you were interviewing this person, and I really liked the conversation that you were having, but my internet was too slow. So I had to wait for your live session to finish, wait for you to put it your on your podcast platform, and then just download it there. And I listened to it at work, and I loved it so much that I listened to it again and again. And eventually I discovered other podcasts as well." So I eventually learned that this opened a new interest amongst the audience. And from not really knowing what a podcast was, they were able to discover my podcast and eventually find other podcasters for them to fall in love with as well. Or it would work the other way around, wherein a small portion of people who already listen to podcasts would discover me and then look for other local podcasters. Because it was so new, a lot of Filipinos were curious if there were other Filipino podcasters as well. And so that opened a whole new door for all of us. Um, as a podcaster, as a content creator, I was able to make a profit out of my podcast as I had clients who were approaching me and asking me to be on my show, as they also wanted their consumers to get a better idea of what they were and what they had to offer. They had seen what the show was doing for my guests because I would have them come on the show and I would sort of get to know them on a different level. So initially, I would invite content creators, YouTubers, people who were sort of professionals in a certain field, and I would give them the opportunity to talk and to share to others what it was that they were doing. And then people would be interested, and then they would make their own inquiries or sort of follow them. And so I guess that brands were starting to pay attention to that, mostly local, and they wanted their customers or people who they wanted to be customers in the future to experience the same things in terms of services and experiences that they had to offer. So 2018 was a very, very interesting year for me in terms of podcasting, because I also was required to get out of my comfort zone and try completely different things, like getting my feng shui and astral readings done, which I did live on the show. It was very interesting. In fact, I cried in one of them. Yeah, so that was that. I also did a couple of fan favorites, which are when I announced my engagement to my long term boyfriend. So I had him on the talk show and we talked about the details of our engagement, and another episode where I got drunk with my mom and asked her a lot of questions you wouldn't usually ask your mother. And that was a fan favorite because a lot of people saw the connection that I had with my mom. And in a way, it's sort of I had people come up to me and say, I want to have that relationship with my mother. And so a lot of them were saying that they sort of tried to do the same thing with their parents as well. And so until now it is a fan favorite. So, but despite these being my viewers' favorite episodes, it was in two very specific episodes that I did that I felt made a huge impact on me personally. It was the episode where I talked about the theater company behind Vagina Monologues, and another episode where I talked about body shaming. Statistically, they were the lowest viewed episodes to date, but I felt like the messages were so strong and it empowered me to want to spread more information about certain issues like women's rights, gender equality, social issues, depression, and other issues of the like. In the Philippines, we don't really talk about these things. It's very taboo. And so I sort of understood why it wasn't getting as much of a response as I would have wanted it to, but I still felt like if no one is going to talk about these things, I want to be the person who does that. So, although those episodes didn't quite get the reach that I was hoping for, we were still able to reach out to a couple of viewers who personally messaged us showing us an interest to help out in the different causes and find the support system that they felt like they really needed. And so I would tell myself after the shows that even if I don't have as many viewers or listeners as I would have wanted, if I can just get through to a couple people, it would make such a difference to me. I would feel like what I'm doing and the efforts that I'm making are worth it because I was able to make someone feel like, oh, this is something I'm going through. And it's nice to feel that someone else is going through it and I'm not alone and I can actually get the help that I need. So we were able to do that. And that was very special to me. I felt that there was definitely something that sparked inside of me and made me feel like I have this immense power in my hands. And what am I going to do with it? I blog and I vlog and I podcast, and I feel like I have such a. I don't want to use the term influence, but for the sake of not having a better term, let's just use the word influence. I felt like I had such a great power to influence people, and I wanted to use it for the greater good. But at the same time, I was a bit confused because I liked entertaining people and making them laugh. But at the same time, I like talking about things of substance as well. So I didn't realize that I could actually mix both, but there's just like a proper way of doing it. So there I was. I was a bit confused, overwhelmed, and faced with a huge problem of not really knowing how to balance everything that I was doing on the online and offline world. I was confused because Facebook was changing the algorithm of how my content was being seen by my viewers. I was getting less and less viewers because I was doing it through my Facebook fan page as compared to the amount of viewers that I would get if I did it on my personal Facebook page. So I was sort of struggling with that. And my confusion turned into frustration, and I felt that there was still a lot of people that I had yet to meet so I could improve the content of my show if I wanted to get into a deeper level. And at the same time, I was also dealing with some personal changes of my own. So in March, after a solid year of podcasting, I decided to take a break so that I could realign my goals for the podcast. 44 episodes in a matter of a year, I felt like it was time for me to take a break so I could focus on other aspects of my life. So, to those who are wondering, I haven't done the podcast in about 6 months. I've been resting, but it was in my hiatus that the most amazing thing happened. And I discovered that there was a really great thing that was happening for other content creators in my community, not only in my city but in my country as well. So in the Philippines, we are a bit separated. We're divided into 3 regions. I am mostly focused on the second, so it's hard for us to communicate with Luzon and Mindanao, but I was still able to reach out to the other parts of the Philippines. So there was suddenly an influx of podcasts growing around me, and I didn't expect that to ever happen. I was surprised. I was getting emails, I was getting messages, I was getting invitations to be on other podcasters shows who sort of saw inspiration from what I was doing and decided that they wanted to make a podcast of their own. So the great thing about us Filipinos is that we are great storytellers, whether it's telling our own stories or telling other people's stories. Sometimes I think we just don't have the means for it. But in a span of 9 months, over 10 podcasts had emerged, ranging from conversations with musicians, content creators, travel, business, storytelling, and self love and personal development topics. There are a bunch of them right now. It was such an honor for me to it was such an honor for me to step back, watch, and even mentor these fellow storytellers and share insights on how to change the way we not only tell stories, but share them with our audiences as well. Because it's one thing I realized that it's one thing to be able to tell the stories, and it's also another way to get them to your audiences. It's something that you really have to mix and match and really play along with. So, whether it was through pre recorded episodes or live interviews or highly produced shows, Filipinos are now understanding and immersing themselves in this wonderful way of communicating with other people. So I realized that there is a need and a want for people to share their experiences with others. And now it's just a matter of developing their own brands, streamlining content, and sharing them with their audiences. So, in a span of, let's say, technically 9 to 10 months, I was able to sit down personally with a handful of podcasters or content creators who are interested in creating their own podcast. I sat down with them, taught them where to put their content. I taught them what was a good format, how they would go about it, how to work with what they had, and at the same time I was also learning with them. So there is also a big growth spurt when it comes to ad agencies here in the Philippines, and a lot in my community. And I'm also teaching them in terms of blogging, vlogging, and podcasting how to get their messages across. So despite not really being there online, I feel like I'm still there because I can help them and kind of just guide them in the right direction and kind of share with them the things that I learned along the way as well. So, having said this, I'm encouraging those who are listening to this session to share their podcasts so we can all connect with one another and hear everyone's stories as well, because everyone has a nice story to tell, or everyone has a story to tell. And I feel like sometimes the greatest hindrance is we're scared that nobody's really going to listen to us or stuff like that. But, one thing I always tell people is you just really have to put yourself out there and try. So, yeah. Um, so I guess that my session is a little bit short. So I'm going to go through your comments real quick and see what you guys have to say. But I hear someone saying, they love my microphone. Thank you. This is actually one of the biggest problems when it comes to the Philippines, is that we don't really have access to all these things. So I actually had to have my mic shipped all the way from the States. I have a couple. A lot of the podcasters that I meet, actually, they use like the microphones from their cell phones or like the microphones out of their headphones. And I always tell them that's okay. The important thing is you're putting out content there and you're working with what you have. So I'm also going to go through a little bit about that. It's a snowball. Yes, it is a snowball. So I also love hearing that Filipino podcaster groups have started forming. Yes, there is a group already, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And I actually do plan on creating our own separate, a local podcasting group here in Cebu, so that we can meet every once in a while, throw ideas around, and just help in any way that we can, because I work very closely with our news agencies as well, and I sort of feel like they can also create content through podcasts in case the audiences aren't really listening to the radio anymore, or they don't read as much. Maybe they can listen to it in the car, because most of the people that I ask here is, how often do you listen to podcasts and when? And they say that they listen to it while they're in transportation, whether they're going to work, whether they're going to school. They usually listen to it like at home. So I was thinking, well, if we could, we could help each other and figure out what kind of content to put during these times, and I guess that would be perfect. So that's something that I might consider doing maybe late this year or early next year. So I like that you think that my process is a bit different, resin. I really had to do that. I experimented with different times. I experimented with different days. And so the format that I was able to pick up at the time was I would do it at 10 o'clock in the evening, so that people were about to go to sleep. And they were on their phones and they would just be looking at their Facebook, because Filipinos are very heavy on Facebook, and sort of see, oh, someone's on live and she's talking to someone that I really like. And so they would try to listen to it and eventually fall asleep. And then they would come back in the morning and listen to it, but then they couldn't really see the audio online. I mean, the video online. So they would download the audio and listen to it through that. So I really had to penetrate my audience via Facebook. It was a struggle, but I got through it. um, is there a website like this for the Philippines, like this one from another IDB session? Not that I know of. Maybe that's something that we could make in the future. Thank you for all the well wishes on my engagement. I don't know how comprehensive the list is, but it's a good start. I will definitely check that out. I'll go through the others in a bit, but yeah. So for all those who are listening and want to start their own podcast, I would like to share these pieces of advice that I've learned over the year, that I have experienced with the wonders of podcasting, based on my own personal experiences and from other podcasters as well. So I know a lot of Filipinos are listening today, a lot of Cebuanos. So a lot of them I haven't really quite met yet. So I hope that you guys are listening to this. And if you want, you can plug your own podcast in the comment section. So here, my number one piece of advice is work with what you have. This is a very important lesson that I learned, because I admit that I stretched myself a little too thin when I started. I was a one-woman team, from setting up and housekeeping, recording, editing, publishing, and marketing. Of course, I had my fiance to sort of get me in the right direction, but every single Sunday I would set up and do everything on my own. And so it was a challenge, because I would interview my guests until 11 in the evening, and then sometimes I would send them home. Sometimes we would continue our conversation until the early hours of the morning. And then I would have to download the episodes, stitch out the audio, put it on my podcast platforms, and then wake up in the morning, spread it online, and then go to work, because I have a regular job. It's like everyone else. It was definitely a well worth feat. And if I had to do it again, I definitely would. But this time around, I would definitely work with people who have similar interests and probably get someone to help me, because I also learned that we have a lot of Filipinos who also edit podcasts professionally. So that was something that I learned very later on. And so because they were editing podcasts already, they knew what to do and they already had the resources. And so eventually they started their own, and now I've also been on a couple of their shows. So yeah. Going back to working with what you have, it was an episode with 032 Conversations, which I'm wearing. It's a local brand and it's a local community in Cebu. It is owned by Carlo Villarica, so you should definitely check them out. That I realized that my setup shouldn't be as complicated as I envisioned it to be. Ideally, if you check my previous episodes, we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment just so that I could have a studio. And then we wanted to have everything soundproofed. We wanted to get all the best equipment, even if I wasn't necessarily earning anything from it yet, but I was so idealistic. But it was through Carlo that I realized that it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be, because Carlo started his podcast by meeting his guests at convenient locations with his compact microphone, and honestly, it still works. It works very well. It's one of the podcasts that I actually listen to locally, and I realized that you can build your setup as you go, and the important thing is really your content, the content that you're putting out. This is also how another podcaster works from my city. His name is Julian Sibi. He's the utterly random tech bloggy. He talks about tech and he talks about creatives. He has two podcasts. One's about tech and one's about the creative life, which I've been on. And he uses the audio from his MacBook. And he doesn't have a mic. He just has a MacBook. And we sat down at a coffee shop and we just had a normal conversation there. Ideally, I'm sure that he wants to upgrade in the future, but it was his drive to actually start making content and telling other people's stories that really amazed me. He didn't care if he didn't have a microphone yet. He just really wanted to create that content. And so at the end of the day, you can have the best setup, but the content isn't quite there, or you can have the like really good content and maybe the equipment isn't quite there yet. But the important thing is you're going to get to that level eventually. It doesn't have to be right then and there. And that's something that I admit that I sort of pressured myself to do. And I guess that I kind of cracked through the pressure a little bit. So, but then I got so yeah, I mean, I lost my studio because we moved to our permanent home. So I'm in the works of sort of building another studio for myself at my office. So when the time comes, I am very excited to go back to podcasting and having a lot of guests over again. So I probably won't do it live anymore, but I'll try to figure a way around it. So yeah. My second lesson is understand that there is time to grow and improve your content quality and setup. That's what I was basically talking about earlier. It doesn't and it will not be perfect right off the bat, but you will grow in time as your show does. And that that's really what I learned. I feel like I pressured myself so much. I got a camera. I barely knew anything. It was just a lot of information that was stuffing down my head, and I wasn't asking help from anyone because I didn't know who to ask help from. But the reason why I'm so strong about mentorship and helping other podcasters is because I don't want to deprive them of the joy and the happiness of creating content or telling other people's stories because they feel like they can't do it. So it took me a while. I wanted to do it 4 years ago. I only started a year ago because I was so intimidated by all the equipment to that I thought I had to have. But now I'm basically I realize that you could just do it off your phone, and you could just work with anything that you have. So that's something that I really want to share with other people who want to start their own podcast but are too afraid to do it. So that's also something that I really try to teach the people that I work with, and at the same time they also help me a lot. So my third lesson is to learn how to ask for help. That is, I feel like the lessons that I'm giving everyone are just really personal experiences because that was my personality. I don't really know how to ask for help. Really I kind of like to do everything with a bang. So if you're someone like me and you can relate, then I hope this helps you. But number 3, learn how to ask for help. As I ended my first international podcast day session last year, I felt confident that I was doing everything right in my podcast, but it turned out that I wasn't really. But it was through a fellow podcaster from the Philippines who pointed out a lot of things that I could use to improve my episodes. So right after my first segment last year, I had another Filipino podcaster who I didn't even know existed message me and check out my podcast and sort of just help me in a lot of things. It was as simple as how I titled my segments and tagging and even my descriptions, and it made such a difference. And it like I followed them to a T, and I feel like I'm it's easier to search for me and it's easier to like find me online. So that really helped me a lot. My fourth piece of advice is challenge your creative abilities. So this one resonates with me a lot because I feel like I'm also in that space. So I kind of want to push myself to another level. So this is a challenge that I'm giving everyone and myself included, but it is challenge your creative abilities. I feel like we as creators are constantly challenged to change our narratives and the way that we deliver our stories. We should try to think outside the box and try to find ways to set ourselves apart. I started a short segment. I hope my mom isn't listening to this because she doesn't know, but I've started a short segment called Candid Conversations. I might add another word to that, but it's where I record conversations that I have with my mother that she doesn't know about, where I capture her most unfiltered opinions about certain topics. Um, just a little bit of information. Something that I was going through this year was that my entire family actually moved back to the States, which is where I originally grew up. And then we moved back here. And then this year, my entire family moved back there. And so communication has been different for me and my mom, who is my best friend. And so, in order to sort of it was something that I just had thought of during the last days of her being in the Philippines with me was I was sitting with her in a room and we were just talking about random things and I started recording our conversation and I thought, you know what, this is something that I could actually start doing to remember my mom when she's not really here. when like when we're on the phone and we have nice conversations, I will start recording them and then I will secretly publish them. And I don't know what her reaction will be when she finds out, but that's something that I thought that I would do because I felt like she had I like talking to older people. I especially like talking to my mom, but I noticed that there is a little bit of a filter because she's conscious that people are looking at her or people can hear her. And so when I did the candid conversations, it was more of an experiment to see what she was saying and how different it was from what she would say when other people were listening to her. And so I'm only going to do this with my mom because I don't want people to suddenly stop talking to me out of fear that I'm secretly recording their conversations. But that's something that I'm very excited to put out. um, I'll do that hopefully soon. I have a couple of episodes in. So yeah. But that's the candid conversations are just one thing that I can think of right now. But I'm sure that everyone has their own ways of setting themselves apart. So it can be through questions or right off the bat, things that I've seen are like making random phone calls or talking to strangers or something like that. Here in the Philippines, I feel like there really is potential when it comes to storytelling. As our previous speaker mentioned, she was talking about audio fiction. We have a lot of they're called radio series here in the Philippines, where they're basically stories that are told obviously in audio format, and a lot of people actually enjoy listening to them. And so you can only catch them on during that certain radio segment. So I do want to reach out to the different radio stations in my city and kind of offer these services to them or let them know that you can actually do this. One thing that they've started doing, I noticed on radio stations that I've also worked with, because I did work on radio for a couple of months a few years ago, was they've actually started recording the live sessions of them being in the studio and then posting them as a way to remember good conversations or good music that they had or good interactions with their listeners and viewers. So I sort of also want to urge them to convert that into a podcast format so that they could always keep track of their shows and whatnot. So it's also a really good um, way to make a portfolio if you're a DJ or if you're a vlogger. So I have Iggy Go, who's also a podcaster. He also started his own, and I know that he talks about finance and stuff like that. So you should definitely check them out. Check him out. Iggy, leave your podcast in the comment section below so everyone can find it. And yeah, so that I mean, we've we've just started podcasting here in the Philippines, and it's as simple as just talking to other people, and there's so much value in that already. I know that Filipinos or people all over the world are so talented and there's so much more that we can do. And so I want to challenge everyone to sort of, you know, go think outside the box and do things differently aside from the interview format, which I still love. But sometimes it's nice to add something else because we kind of get bored of doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah. Another piece of advice is to put in the necessary amount of work. Here in the Philippines, we are taught by agencies, ad agencies, or multi-channel networks, or at workshops or through experience that collaboration is the way to go if you want to boost your presence online, which I see is very perfect when it comes to the podcast format. However, what I want to point out to everyone who is listening is that if it's your podcast, you shouldn't really depend on your guests alone to boost the show. So my personal opinion is that they've already been on your show, so their job is sort of done. Um, I've heard a lot of feedback, which is sort of disappointing. I don't know if it happens a lot where you're from, but I will have a podcaster every once in a while complain that they had someone big on their show, but that guest didn't really plug the podcast as much as they would have wanted to. And so it sort of felt like they were depending on that guest to boost their show up. But what I try to instill to them is that it's your show. And so you need to do more of the work. So I don't know if we have different opinions with other people, but I like to do I really like to kind of encourage other people to like doing the work yourself. That's what I did with my blog and my vlog and my podcast. And so if your guests also want to boost it as much as you do, then great. But if they don't, then I still feel like it's your responsibility. So that's just something that I kind of wanted to put out there. Another piece of advice is don't be afraid to experiment on how you market yourself. I take pride in saying that I did mine every Sunday night from 10 to 11 o'clock, sometimes even more, through Facebook Live. Sometimes I would do it in makeup. Sometimes I wouldn't even take a bath at all. Sometimes I would be all dressed up in a gown if I came from a party. Sometimes I would be in house clothes. And it was just, I experimented on how I marketed myself. I experimented with my guests on where I would blast them online. I just wanted to see what worked for my audience. And I really do urge people to put themselves out there and try to see what works best for them, especially now where our audiences are constantly changing. I've noticed a change when it comes to blogging. I've noticed a change when it comes to vlogging and even podcasting. Consumers are getting a lot smarter. They have preferences now. There's a lot of creators out there, and so they kind of want to pick which one is their favorite one. So you just have to really experiment with what works best for you and what you think works best for your audience as well. Another thing that I want to share with everyone, and I mentioned this last year, and I will say it again, is that don't be afraid of not having an audience, especially at the start. So, because of my experiences online, I have also spent a huge portion of my time in the offline world mentoring and giving inspirational workshops and talks to either individuals, schools, businesses, agencies, and the content community and the content creator community. Which I basically give talks about, which is what we're all doing, storytelling. This year alone, I can't even count how many workshops and talks that I've done for private sectors and for individuals and group communities alone. So, based on what I've noticed, there is a turnout of people. There's a large community of people that actually show up. They're willing to pay to learn, or they actually take time out of their busy schedules to come to a workshop and learn. And so I'm a little bit distracted, but I see the interest, whether it be from children, business owners, and those hoping to improve their craft. But I can put in all the work and tell them what to do, give them everything that they need to know getting into it. But the most frequent question I still get asked until today is, what if nobody listens to me, and how do I respond to haters? So it's a very interesting question that I get asked a lot. I don't know why, but if you, maybe I do know why, because if you search for my content online, you will actually see that I am no stranger when it comes to criticism. I have a lot of haters online. Actually, I don't really consider them haters, but it's just a lot of people sharing their opinions that we don't necessarily have, I guess. And I get asked that a lot. How do I deal with haters, and what do I do if nobody listens to me? And I always tell them that if you have a story to tell, someone out there is going to listen to you. It doesn't matter if it's 1%, if it's two people. The important thing is that someone is actually listening to you, and that is going to grow. And you know, I always say that I got into the art or the sphere of content creation because I felt that I had so many things that I wanted to say to the world, and I just did it, not knowing if anyone was going to listen to me. But I worked hard, and eventually, I find out that people are actually listening, and it's nice. But I still say that if nobody listens to me, I'm still going to keep talking. So that's just something I say. And to address the haters or the bashers or people who don't really like your opinion, there's always another show for them. And if they don't like you, they can always find another one. The important thing is they are curious about the content that is out there. And I feel like that is the most important thing. And I don't really respond to haters because I feel like I shouldn't be giving them the time of the day. And so I like to joke around and say they're not paying me, so I don't care. But that's just my opinion. So yeah. And also to quote my favorite podcaster, Bobby Lee of Tiger Belly, 50% of your listeners will love you and the other 50% will hate you. And that's how you know you've made it. So that's the thing that will keep driving you. And I honestly do agree with those sentiments. So I actually do find myself walking around in my very little city, and people will come up to me and some will say, "Hi, Issa, I listen to your podcast. I watch your vlogs," and then they'll have someone beside them say, "Oh, I don't really like her." And I'm just like, "Well, that's fine." But yeah, I mean, it's fun. So yeah. So as I come to an end of my segment, I would like to thank all the listeners who stayed with me for the entire hour of 45 minutes. I also urge you to check out the other amazing creators from my country and around the world as well. There is a podcast out there for you. So just keep looking and enjoy. For the interview with the other podcasters of the Philippines that I've worked with that you cannot find on my, or who haven't left their links in the comment section, you can find them on my blog. That's issaplease.com, or on different platforms. It was indeed a wonderful time. It is indeed a wonderful time for creatives and creators. And I'm confident that in the next year, there will be another breed of Filipinos representing my country that I am so proud of. Salamat kay ninyong tanan sa pagpaminaw nako karong adlaw. Mahal ko kayong lahat. That was Filipino. That was Visaya and Filipino for thank you so much for listening to me today, and I love you all. So thank you guys. I'm gonna sort of go through your comments, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below so I can kind of go through them. So yeah, I see that comedy makes it easier to digest heavier topics, provides a sort of balance. And yes, I do agree with that because I like to mix both. I will listen to comedy and then I'll listen to something deep. And I feel like it depends on the mood. So it's nice to have like a roster of like your favorite podcasts. Thank you so much, guys, for enjoying this. I'm trying to find questions here. Oh, see, there's an amazing episode of poetry of people telling stories after Hurricane Maria. That's awesome. I definitely love to listen to that. Also, another podcast that's coming out is something that it's sort of like Picha Kucha. I think that is what it's called. And they have live storytelling sessions, which I recently did a couple weeks ago. And they turned those wonderful stories into podcasts, and they also put them in our local newspaper. And so I say that it's a wonderful time for creatives and content creators because people are really starting to see our value in the community, and they're giving us these platforms. So we have podcasts, and we're on the newspaper as well. So I'm going to be in the newspaper next week for my piece. And if you want to see that episode, it's also on my YouTube channel. So yeah. I created pods with shirt mic for a year. That's awesome. Yes, that's true. There we often do overcomplicate podcasting. So it's really as simple or as complicated as we want it to be. What else? So yeah, don't feed the trolls, they'll eventually move on. Yes, that is so true. Trolls are always trolling. Um, if you guys ever want any help when it comes to podcasting, I am very open to mentoring, whether you're from the Philippines or you're from another country. That is definitely something that I like to do in order to compensate for me not being able to really put out my own content at the time. As much as I love telling stories, I love listening to other people's stories as well. And so if um also I feel like if I would never say no to helping other people because I've gotten so much help as well when it comes to podcasting. Right after my session last year, I got so much good responses and a lot of people helping me. So if there's anything that you guys need help with, I am more than welcome to mentor as well. You can email me. That's contact Issa, please, ISSAPLEASE at gmail.com. You can message me on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I reply on every single platform. That's perfect. So if you guys ever want to keep in touch, feel free to. So yeah, I have something that says 20 slides with only pics in 20 minutes. Oh, what does that mean? Iggy is asking, will there be issues if you read out loud content that's not yours in a podcast? I feel like if it comes to this, I feel like it's best to ask for permission. You know, it doesn't hurt if you kind of ask someone, "Hey, I kind of wanted to feature your content in my podcast and sort of share it." And that's a way of like X. I mean, what is the term, like X deals or like marketing each other? You're helping each other, so you can read out their content and then share it for them and let them know, hey, this is from, let's say, Issa, please. And then I'll find your content and tell them, hey, this guy, Iggy Go, also talked about my content and sort of gave his insight about it. And it would be great if you guys would listen to it. So I feel like right now, in the world of content creation, there is no such thing as competition. I've eradicated any thought of there being competition because I feel like everyone just wants to tell their own stories, and so why create tension and stuff like that? Why not help each other out? So that's just my opinion. Yes, I did mention, am I saying it right? Picha Kucha. So there's something like that here in the Philippines right now. It's called Story Nights, and it's by Tribe Cebu. And so if you go on my YouTube channel, it's Issa Please, you will find that I did a session. I did my first and only story Picha Kucha sort of inspired talk, and it was for the theme If It's Meant to Be. So if you guys want to listen to that, I am planning to also do an audio version of it if you guys really want to hear it. I'll probably record it very soon so you guys can get a better version of that. So yeah, I'm all eyes on these storytelling things. Thanks for the link. So just on your comments and feedback alone, it does go to show that there is really, really an interest when it comes to storytelling, hearing different people's stories. And I feel like the Philippines has so many, 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 many beautiful stories to tell. We are a third world country with a lot of very hard workers. We're a growing country and with people who have very interesting stories. We also have a lot of people who are immigrants who also have their own fair share of stories to tell. One day I do plan on interviewing my dad, who also moved to the States with us and has gone through a lot. And so it just goes to show that you don't always have to interview the most famous person, the most sought after person, if it's just someone who you feel has a very wonderful story to tell. then it's definitely something that you should take into consideration. So I do urge everyone to, if you haven't and you're interested, to definitely start your own podcast. And if you need help, I am more than willing to help you guys. So yeah, I guess I'm done with my session. If you guys want to contact me, you can find me online. I'm Issa, please. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, daghan kay salamat ninyong tanan. Di pa kay ko nga naminaw mo nako. So I just said thank you so much for listening. I had so much fun, and I'm glad that you guys listened to me for an entire hour. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Issa. We always appreciate you coming on, sharing your story and your perspective. I think that's one of the beautiful things about international podcasting is that, otherwise these stories that you're sharing would not usually come to the ears, of different regions. So being able to sort of hear your journey from podcasting and getting into mentorship is pretty impressive. Just seeing that, you can take a hiatus and you can still be involved with it, right? And you can help shape sort of the culture and the narrative that's going on with the Filipino podcasting. It's amazing to hear just the exponential growth, what's been going on, and just the interest and desire to share stories, right? And I think that's a very important element moving forward for you over there.
Definitely.
Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of our heart and the International Podcast Day team for joining the International Podcast Day 2018 live celebration. We appreciate it, and
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah.
Happy International Podcast Day. I have it on my wall right here. You just can't
Yeah, I
see it.
saw that. That's great.
Have
All
a good
right.
rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, everybody have fun celebrating and happy International Podcast Day.